Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Andrew. For those of you who do not know me, today I am joined by the legendary Rodney Wilson, who is credited for creating LGBTQ plus History Month. I've got my little pride shirt on today. Hi, Rodney. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing very well, Andrew. Happy to be with you.
Yay, thank you so much for joining me. This is my fourth official episode of my little Drinking the Tea-Kiki series that I've started on my channel
Mhm.
recently. Just talking about some fun stuff with some fun people about what they've got going on and things that they've done. And you, as I said, are pretty legendary. You went through a lot. I did watch the documentary Taboo Teaching. It's here on YouTube, so I'll have it linked with this video. I'd love to hear a little bit about your upbringing because you were raised in Missouri, correct?
Yes, I was raised in southern Missouri, about an hour south of St. Louis, a little town, 2,500 people. It's where my mother and father were raised. I have one sister. I went through K through 12 education there. As soon as I could leave, I left. I spent a lot of time on the East Coast, 14 years in Massachusetts, for example, after teaching 7 years in St. Louis in the 1990s. But that's still home, the hometown, and I have a lot of people there, a lot of relations there. My mother was one of 18 children. My dad
Whoa,
was one of 13.
whoa.
So, as you can imagine, I grew up with
A lot.
so many aunts and uncles, right?
Yeah.
And I think I counted once, I'd have to do it again to be sure, but I think I have 66 first cousins. So it's a huge, huge family. Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember, this was before 1960, before the birth control pills. So lots of children were being born.
Yeah. That is wild. So, when did your interest in history develop? I mean, did you always want to be a teacher, or how did that kind of all come about? How did you land in the role of being a history teacher in the first place?
Well, in school, actually, my favorite subject was math, and
Mhm.
I still love math. History was not my favorite subject. In fact, the worst class I ever had in K through 12 was a 10th grade history class. It was so boring. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't do well. I mean, I passed it, of course, but I generally made mostly A's, a couple of B's, and in that class, I made a C. It was the only C I ever made in high school to my memory. And it was because the teacher didn't really care. The teacher was a football coach, and I think that was what the teacher really wanted to do. But after graduating from high school in 1983, I started doing a lot of research, just trying to find who I am and what's my place in the world. So I started with family history, actually, started researching a lot of family history when it was really hard to do. I mean, in the 80s, it was almost impossible to research family history. Today, it's so easy in so
So
many
easy.
ways. And then that interest in family history got me interested in the bigger history around me. And I had a couple of really good teachers when I was in college, really good history teachers, and that sparked more of an interest. So over time, I dropped mathematics as my big passion, and I moved into studying history. And I always like teaching what I learn. So being a teacher seemed to be the right avenue for me. And now I've been teaching since 1990. I'm still teaching full time. I'll do it another 2, 3, 4 years, depending on circumstances. And I really believe that history is so important. And I think there's a lot of deficit in terms of what people know about history.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey of identity in all of that because I mean, you're pretty much one of, if not like the first openly gay teachers, right? Or are you the first, or are you just kind of like one of the pioneers in there?
Well, I'm sure in other states there were others
Yeah.
prior who generally, though, I know there were others, but generally they were fired. So
Oh,
that was what made my circumstance in Missouri 30 years ago, 1994, a little bit different
yeah.
in that I was not a tenured teacher
Mm.
when I came out to my students directly in the classroom. And then I attained tenure the following year, taught an additional 2 years. So the idea is that in Missouri, I was the first openly gay teacher to come out to students and not be, shown the door in about 5 minutes.
Hmm. And so but prior to all of that, what was it like since obviously being like openly gay in Missouri as a teacher wasn't a thing, what was your awakening like in that regard? And how did it kind of like, did you ever think that you wouldn't be able to be a teacher because of that, or what was all of that like in your process?
I did think I could not be a teacher. I remember in 11th grade or 12th grade, a friend and I drove to Oral Roberts University. We were both evangelical Christians.
Hmm.
And I was thinking maybe that's where I'd go to school. They took us all into the huge gymnasium where they played basketball and all of this. And they had us sit in places where we might want to be in our lives. So if we wanted to be a teacher, you'd sit in a certain area. If you wanted to be a scientist, you'd sit in a certain area. And I remember sitting with those who wanted to be teachers, but thinking, I can't do this. I can't be a teacher because, this would have been 1982.
Mm.
And you'll remember 1977, 1978, Anita Bryant, the Briggs Initiative, all of that. So it was fresh in my mind. So I didn't think I could be a teacher. And in fact, when I finished high school, I didn't go right to college, in part because my parents hadn't. So it wasn't part of the family culture that you go to college. So instead, I went to work at a Walmart store nearby. I did that for almost 3 years before I went to college beginning at age 21, and then decided I can be a teacher.
Wow. So take me back then to the day that you came out to your students in that March of 94. I mean, how are you feeling? What were you thinking? Was it something that just sort of like happened in the moment, or was it something that you've been planning for a while? Or like, what was that particular day like for you?
It was planned and spontaneous. I knew that the condition existed for me to come out that day. I had been to the United States Holocaust Museum the prior week. I had purchased this a poster that had various patches of those who had been imprisoned in, either in a death camp or in a concentration camp or a labor camp. And I knew that the potential of identifying myself with the pink triangle was there, but I didn't know that I would actually do it until I did it. And it was really a simple matter. I was explaining the various patches for various people. Of course, overwhelmingly, the Holocaust was an attempt to, rid the world of Jewish people. I mean, that was the target, the primary target. That was the brunt of the Holocaust. But then there were these other groups, kind of around the edges, including gay men under paragraph 175. So I knew I could identify. I couldn't say, I'm Polish, therefore I'm Jewish, therefore, but I could say I'm gay. So possibly this pink triangle could have been something that could have been for me if I'd gotten caught up in that mess. So I did that. I think it was appropriate. I thought it was then. I still do. I think it was a good way to teach a lesson, to make it clear that history involves real people. Even though they may not be here anymore, and it might have been a long time ago, still real people were affected, real people were involved. And I think that's something important for teachers to do, especially teachers of history, to make it pertinent to their lives, to make it, the possibility that this could have involved them in some way. And then they're more interested in the story itself, because history is a great story, a sad, awful, wonderful, joyful, terrible story involving human beings who just happened to live on this planet before we got here.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, there was probably so many emotions that were going through you on that. And I'm sure part of you felt relief, but then there was sort of like an outcry that happened afterwards. So how did you cope with the chaos, the backlash? I mean, were you fearful or, I mean, your colleagues described you as a very strong man in that documentary, but I'd still just love to hear what it was like to go through that because it must have been such a whirlwind.
It was a whirlwind. 1994 was the busiest year of my life, the most consequential in many ways. I think what gave me the stamina to successfully navigate my way through that, there were two things. One, I knew it was really important that I make it, that I survive it, that I not be fired. If I had been fired, it would have sent a really awful message to every LGBTQ student and employee in that school district. So I felt a real responsibility for this to work out. Secondly, I think I got some of the stamina knowing that I was right,
Mm.
that being LGBTQ is really not a big deal. It's part of nature's glorious diversity. And I was on the right side. And eventually I would be vindicated, if not vindicated in 1994. So, those two things, knowing I was on the right side and took the right position, and knowing that I had to succeed and I could not end up being fired because of what happened, those were the two main motivating factors, I think, that made that a bearable couple of years.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to shift gears for a second now toward this history month that it has become. I mean, it was gay and lesbian first. Obviously, it's grown to be more inclusive over the years. But at what point during all of this did that kind of come about, like the creation of this month? Because I believe it was in October, right? Like it was 6 months later that was kind of the first one. So how did that actual creation come about from all of this madness?
Well, I had started thinking about a lesbian and gay history month, as we called it then, in 1993, but I didn't sit down and type up the proposal until January of 94. I sent it out to every then known queer organization I could get a snail mail address for. I didn't even have email myself at all until the very end of 1994. And the proposal simply said, we already have Women's History Month in March. We've got Black History Month in February. I think we need a Lesbian and Gay History Month because the same circumstance exists for us that existed, for example, for Dr. Carter Woodson, who started Black History Month in 1926. This was an area that was not given its due, an area that was neglected and ignored, and I wanted to put a spotlight on it. So I had actually started that in January. The coming out happened in March. And then about April and May, we organized a national coordinating committee of some really wonderful people on that committee who knew how to get things done. And the ball just started rolling. And that fall, October 1994, 30 years ago now, it was very small that first year, but it was the first Lesbian and Gay History Month, now LGBTQ History Month, and it's widely celebrated in universities and colleges, community groups, and also now in 20 locations total around the world.
That is so awesome. And you, I mean, I really have to commend you because, I mean, how brave and how crazy. And I mean, like you were saying earlier about history and remembering that there are real people involved. And I mean, I even where I am in my life in my mid 30s, I hear about things like Stonewall or things that happened before my time. And then I consider this current situation that happened during my time, but I was so young that I had no idea. I was 5 years old when all of this was going on, and I was in California versus Missouri. So you know what I mean? Like so different, but it's so like just invigorating in a way, I guess, to just hear from like a trailblazer themselves. Like I'm just like that's crazy.
Mhm.
Did you have a particular reason for October as the month that you chose it, or is it kind of we just had National Coming Out Month yesterday, and we're or
Mhm.
Coming Out Day yesterday, and we're in
Mhm.
the middle of History Month now, but why October?
I did, in writing that proposal, think about which month would work. And October worked for several reasons. One, it's in the academic calendar. Initially, there were some people who said, why not just do this in June? Well, June is not in the academic calendar. Overwhelmingly colleges, universities, secondary schools are not in session in June, so that wouldn't work. So it had to be sometime not June, July, or August. In October 1979, we had the first March on Washington for LGBTQ rights. In 1987, we had the second one in Washington in October, in fact, October 11th. That's why the following year, October 11th of 1988, we had the first National Coming Out Day. And National Coming Out Day, which started in 1988, was now 6 years old. So that seemed to be also a good month in which to put this occasion, to remember those two marches on Washington, and to also build it around National Coming Out Day, because a Lesbian and Gay History Month is coming out the history, bringing the history out of the closet.
Wow. Well, I'd love, if you don't mind, to move on to one of these fun little trivia questions. We each have coffee. This drinking the Tea-Kiki portion. It's only a couple. It should be pretty just standard, I guess. But if you get it right, I'll take a little swig. If you get it wrong, you take a little swig.
Okay.
If you want to talk about these more in between, then I'd love to hear some more.
Okay.
One should be pretty easy for you. What years were you the co-host of Outlook St. Louis?
1994 to 96. That was a really small cable access show. We did 12 episodes total. It was news, LGBTQ news in St. Louis, in Missouri, and occasionally around the country.
That's awesome. My boyfriend's from St. Louis, and when we were watching the Taboo teaching, he was just like, Melville? He's like, I know Melville. Like, what? He's like, I had no idea this was going on.
Oh, wow. Which area in St. Louis is he from?
Creve Coeur.
Oh, of course. Creve Coeur, Broken Heart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I have not yet been there. It's on the list for us to go because I think it'd be great.
Well, let me tell you, if I may, you need to get there before July of next year, because the Missouri History Museum has a Gateway to Pride exhibit. It's their first full-scale exhibit of LGBTQ history, 6,000 square feet. It is magnificent. So try to get there before that leaves.
That is good to know. And yeah, that is just good to know. So next question here. What TV show did a storyline based on your coming out?
All My Children.
Correct.
They had a gay history teacher named Michael Delaney, played by the actor Chris Bruno. And he came out using the same poster I did and the same way I did to the young people there in Pine Valley.
Did you get to meet him, or did they like talk to you about that at all?
I've never met him. I think we had a phone call once. Certainly we've exchanged text and emails, and we're Facebook friends and that sort of thing. But you know what? I don't think I ever met him in person. I think it was all done via social networks.
Social networks. What year did that episode air?
That episode aired in, I believe, December 1995.
You were very close. It was January of 96.
Okay.
I think it was the first episode in January of 96.
Okay. Oh, I have to drink some coffee.
Take a little swig of your coffee, get some caffeine.
All right.
So you were on the cover of the Riverfront Times. How many pages was that booklet that you were on the cover of?
That was an alternative newspaper in St. Louis, recently met its demise. I'm thinking maybe 36 pages.
It was 96 pages.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was a thick one.
I've had my drink. Okay. How did you know that?
Honestly, it's on the cover. Like on the screenshot of the cover, it says 96 pages just underneath the title. And I was trying to pick a tricky question.
And you know what? Now that you say that, in my head, I can see that 96 pages.
Yeah, just right up in the top little corner. So the last question here, It's a queer history month, not necessarily an LGBTQ one, but what was the most recent country to add one, and when did they do it?
New Zealand, July of this year, 2024.
I was actually very surprised by that when I found that because I'd been to New Zealand. I spent a year there back in 2015, and I like they're so open. I just would have thought that they would have had this focus a little bit earlier, but I was a little surprised by that.
Yeah, we were so excited for New Zealand to join the team. We had from the beginning on the International Committee on LGBTQ plus History Months, ICOM. We meet quarterly via Zoom. We have
Mhm.
representatives from all these locations, and we had someone on there from New Zealand from the beginning. That person had to leave to finish a PhD, and then Claire O'Leary came on, and she works with the Queer Archives in New Zealand. Was very much behind getting that event on the New Zealand calendar.
That is awesome.
Mm.
When I was there, I worked in the parliament. So I was actually like around all of those decisions and policymakers and all the things. So like, I don't know, I might have even met her at some point.
Very cool. Yeah.
But yeah. So I only got a few questions left here.
Okay.
But I just would like to know how like you feel with what it's become. Like in the present day, these 30 years later, this journey that you've been through, it's grown, it's grown, it's grown. Like, how do you feel about that? I mean, you must feel some sort of like, this is your mark on the world, you know?
Mhm. It's very satisfying that this idea, it goes back to Carter Woodson. Every history month in the world goes back to Carter Woodson almost 100 years ago with Black History Month. So the idea now that we've got this LGBTQ plus History Month, and it survived and it weathered the storms of controversy that came against it, and now it's been planted in other soil, and we're working right now, for example, with some representatives from Venezuela and Brazil and Spain, trying to get official history months in those three locations in 2025. So we want to continue to spread the idea. That's the purpose of our international committee. Yeah, it's sort of my life's work now, and it's incredibly satisfying. And I plan to continue trying to advance History Month ideas around the world for the foreseeable future.
That's awesome. And you mentioned earlier that you're still teaching. Are you at
Mhm.
the same school that you've been at the whole time?
No,
No?
I taught at that high school for 7 years. I came out in the fourth year. I taught 3 additional years. Then I moved to Massachusetts. I
Okay.
lived out there for 14 years. When I was there, I taught in a prison. I had inmate students who were 17 to 21. They hadn't finished their high school education prior to incarceration. I taught English to Spanish speakers. I worked in a community adult ed program, GED prep, that sort of thing. And then I came back to Missouri in 2011, and I work now at the same community college I went to from ages 21 to 23 when I decided to go into college again after being out of high school for 3 years. I teach American history and world religions.
That's awesome. And you said you've got a few years left of that. And then do you have any plans for after?
I don't have plans for after, which makes it hard to actually stop doing it.
Yeah.
That's why I keep saying, 2 to 4 years, but I may decide I'll be 60 in January. So
You've
I
still
may
got plenty of time.
decide, yeah, I may just go to 65
Yeah.
and just go right into Medicare or something. Who knows?
Yeah.
One never knows about these things. Life is uncertain, and you don't know what's going to happen. But as long as I'm still enjoying it and capable of doing it, I think I'll probably continue doing it on a year by year basis.
It's crazy to think about how young you were when all of this was going down initially, because you said you were turning 60 soon, which means you were in your 20s,
I was 29.
29. Like that.
Hmm.
So that's so young to
Yeah.
carry such a burden. Um, but is there anything else that you'd like to share or talk about, or anything I might have missed along the way here in our conversation?
You were thorough. I'm going to just mention one thing.
Sure.
Uh, uh, this is a book
Okay.
by a historian, Michael Lee. It
Sure.
is about Randy Schultz.
Okay.
Randy Schultz is the journalist who worked with the San Francisco Chronicle. He wrote And the Band Played On
Okay.
about the early history of the AIDS crisis. He wrote Conduct Unbecoming about gays and lesbians in military. He wrote The Mayor of Castro Street about Harvey Milk. This is hot off the press. It was just published and released this month. So it's History Month. I think this would be a great book for people to pick up.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. I will definitely have to look into that. Um, yeah, I was writing for HIV plus for a while, so like my interest in all of that has grown a lot. So thank you for sharing that with me,
Mm-hmm.
and thank you for sharing your time with me on this show today and all of your knowledge and your journey. I mean, what an honor to be in the presence of you here. So, I thank you, and I have all of your stuff linked. So anyone watching, click all the things below, follow them on Instagram, check out this book, go watch Taboo Teaching. And yeah, and in the meantime, while you're all down there, press on that little subscribe button to join me for any future videos. In the meantime, I hope you all have a day just as beautiful as you, and I will see you all in the next one.